If any of you were wondering what Victor Wembanyama is currently up to this off-season, oh, nothing much. He's just shaved his head, decided to spend 10 days at a Shaolin temple where he wakes up at 4:30 AM every morning to go for runs whilst training his mental and physical fortitude. That's what Victor Wembanyama has been up to this off-season. And whilst it's funny and interesting to see Wemby embracing such a rich culture over in China, it shouldn't be all that funny for the rest of the NBA. Because anyone who is 21 years old, who willingly shaves their head, who willingly stays away from, some of life's great enjoyments and decides to wake up at 4:30 AM to train with monks, I would say that person is the right combination of insane and dedicated to become one of the greatest athletes ever. And for some players, this might be perceived as PR or just a 10-day experience, but this is just who Wemby is. Not only does he have the freakiest combination of skills, size, and athleticism we have ever seen, but since before he was even drafted, one thing was clear. As impressive as his physical traits are, Wemby has all of the mental traits to become one of, if not the greatest player ever. I mean, you don't reach this level of flexibility as a 7'5" human without being dedicated. Do you see how he is moving? I can barely touch my toes and I'm over a foot smaller than him. Or when it was reported that Spurs staffers were not supposed to message or call him after 9:30 because that is the period of time in which he reads before going to bed. And I know some of this sounds trivial, but when you listen to experts much smarter than myself about the value of sleep, flexibility, mobility, breathing, all of this is seen to elevate performance in a major way. And from every report, Wemby takes it as seriously as you can, which might sound obvious for an athlete that could make nearly $1 billion over his career, but I guarantee you 99% of the league isn't taking their health and preparation as seriously as Wemby. And that's scary considering 100% of the league doesn't have the same physical traits or skill set that Wemby does. And that's probably worth mentioning as well. The reason all of this is terrifying is because we've already seen the on-court product, and I think Wemby was so good in his first year, and particularly the second half of that first year, that people almost took for granted what he did last year. It wasn't normal. That was one of the best second-year seasons we have ever seen before it got cut short due to injury. And when the expectations are so high, people are so reactive. And that's what we saw the first 10 games of this season, where Wemby struggled a little bit, and you had people suggesting he was overrated, overhyped, and in the case of one anonymous scout, he said this: he's absolutely awesome on defense, and not impactful at all on offense. He just looks like he's playing without a whole lot of direction. Well, after that quote came out, over the next 36 games, Wemby averaged 26, 11, and 4, whilst casually making nearly 3.5 threes per game on 37%. And not just any kind of threes.
Oh, deep three by Wembanyama, are you kidding? This is a heat check. You gotta be kidding.
And I know some people will hate the fact he takes so many threes, but when you can shoot it at that percentage, and when you can make the kind of threes he makes, it leaves the defense with an impossible decision. Do you leave him open and let him continue to knock down threes at will, or do you press up onto him and then let him drive past you and get to the rim? Either way, you're cooked. And this is a perfect example of that, where Horford is high up, and that just allows Wemby to go past him and get to the rim. Or this time, where it's just that little hezzy to freeze Cornet, and with Cornet so far away from the rim, Wemby is comfortable putting the ball on the floor and getting to his spot for the floater. And more importantly than the shooting or the numbers, the Spurs were a plus 120 in his minutes over those 36 games. And that's a big aspect of Wemby's game, and a key detail that shows he's already one of the best players in the league. The impact he has when he's on the floor versus off the floor. This is always a great measurement of if a player is a superstar and if they are an all NBA level player. How much different does your team perform with you on the floor versus off the floor? Well, for Vic, the Spurs had a net rating of +3 with him on the floor, which would have ranked 11th, a top 10 defense and an above average offense. In other words, they were a good team when Wemby was on the floor. When he was off the floor, however, well, it was a bit of a different story. And obviously what stands out there is the defense. This is why he was going to win the Defensive Player of the Year, despite potentially not even making the playoffs, because it was Wemby who was single-handedly the difference between the Spurs being a good defensive team and being Utah Jazz levels of bad on that end. And just to emphasize that, following the injury to Wemby during All-Star break, the Spurs had the 27th ranked defense over the last 30 games of the year. You can dispute on-off numbers, but simply put, when they removed him from the lineup, the Spurs were a bottom 3 defense in the league. Now, this is why it is slightly painful that San Antonio was so close to securing another generational defensive player to put next to Vic and ensure the defense would be all-time great, but still, the Spurs secured the 2nd overall pick, and with that pick, the flexibility they have, the opportunities they have with the current assets, there is no world in which San Antonio don't surround Wemby with even more talent than before. And that's without mentioning the natural progression you will see from the likes of Stephon Castle on both ends, Jeremy Sohan, who continued to improve defensively, and then hopefully a fully healthy and integrated De'Aaron Fox, who has the potential to have the best season of his career alongside the best player he has ever played with. Oh, and then of course, Kevin Durant might be a Spur by the time this video comes out. But for Wemby, it is about health first and foremost. We've all seen the injury history of players his size. It is not good. You look at a recent example like Kristaps Porzingis, who has never been fully healthy, or Ralph Sampson from back in the day, Manute Bol, Mark Eden. This is the kind of size Wemby is, and generally speaking, it has unfortunately resulted in careers plagued with injuries. There was one player in particular, however, who managed to avoid that same fate. A guy who happens to be one of the greatest players ever, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And what's so interesting about Kareem is, just like Wemby, he spent a lot of his career working on his mobility, his flexibility, even training with Bruce Lee for an extended period of time. These are not the kind of things you would have associated with an NBA player at that time, but Kareem was ahead of his time, and you can see the work paid off. Wemby has that blueprint and decades of research since then on how to prevent injuries that could benefit him. And from everything we've heard, he is taking his approach as seriously as you could possibly hope. And honestly, that's probably more crucial than anything he could do basketball related. Now, knowing who Wemby is, he won't just settle for that. He'll be working on every skill imaginable as well to become the best shooter, the best passer, the best ball handler, the best defender he could possibly be at that size. And this is the kind of level of dedication, of preparation, of commitment you need to go to that next level. Now, if you want to hear me talk more about the potential of Dylan Harper or even Kevin Durant on the Spurs next year, click on this video. If you enjoyed this content, consider subscribing for more content like this. Have a great day. Bye.